Okay, well, that sure was fun doing that 3 times in a row in order for the channels to reconnect so we could start the freaking show. But anyway, before I go off on some old man rant about technology's not as good as it used to be, I'm going to start the recording. Actually, I'm going to clear last night's audio clips, and then we shall proceed with Liberty Talk. Uno momento, por favor. Because I'm so freaking with it tonight. Oh, here we go.
The Constitution isn't just a document. It's a blueprint for freedom. We're breaking down politics at every level, exposing government overreach, and going where the mainstream media surely won't. Join us in defending individual rights against the bureaucratic tide. You're listening to the Missouri Liberty Report.
All righty, everyone, and we are back for another Martzist edition of the Missouri Liberty Report. Just a reminder, if you are watching this evening and you did not catch our interview last night with Spike Cohen, make sure you go check it out. The audio version's out there, the video version's out there on YouTube, Rumble, and Facebook, our normal channels that we stream to every night. Just make sure that you go check that out. All right. As I just stated, we have Mr. Martz on the phone with us. Tom Martz, good evening to you, sir.
Good evening.
All right. So let's just I sent you guys an X post earlier, and let's just talk about it for a minute, because this is becoming the norm from the Republicans, a lot of these Republicans in the state of Missouri. Now, I'm just going to read the post from Tom Estes, who we believe is Rick Bratton's L.A. It says, "It's amazing that we live in a world where we have fake Republicans running in primaries who oppose Amendment 3, Amendment 4, the income tax phase out as well." This is the best part. "As well as being openly anti-Semitic. My guess, they all go down in embarrassing defeat. Hashtag MoLedge." So, Tom, I'm going to let you speak first, and then Brandon, you give me your thoughts. But Tom, are you saddened by the fact that we are not real Republicans and we are just anti-amendment, anti-Semitic people?
Well, I never proclaimed to be a Republican, but I do find it odd that people who do promote themselves as being Republican aren't really that Republican. Because if you read the Republican Party platform, the A3, A4, and the tax phase out, in my opinion, would be in opposition to the Republican Party platform, because A3 in reality is not a pro-life bill. It's just a pro-life as we see it bill, because abortion is still permitted in the state of Missouri. A4, I think, is initiative petition reform, which, if you read that, all it's going to do is that it will make it harder not to change the Constitution, but only make it harder for the people. Should they want to change the Constitution, make it harder. But if the General Assembly wants to change the Constitution, it still meets the same requirements as what we have now. And as for the tax phase out, if you read the language of the tax phase out, of course, I've heard this argument, and I've seen this argument many times on various forms of social media. Oh, well, there's constitutional protections in there to make sure that what we increase, we also deduct. Well, no, you guys don't have any availability of saying there's constitutional protections in there, because none of you ever read the Constitution, nor do you follow the Constitution. And the fact of the matter is it's not realistically a remove a penny here, add a penny here type thought process. It is whatever the General Assembly decides is equal in application from the removal and the addition. So the fact of the matter is even people like a Tom Estes, I think he falls into that social media warrior where he wants to be right all the time. And even if you can show and prove that he is factually inaccurate in his statements, he will still make the case that he's correct.
Oh, he's like another version of Nick Schroer then, basically.
Yeah, pretty much.
Your thoughts?
I mean, I hope he's not right. That's the only thing is like Republicans in a primary. I just don't trust them. Like, I hate to be that way, but like the Republican voters that vote in the primaries, they do have a habit of just picking like the least constitutional, most pro Israel, pro send all of our money to Israel people. Even in the House, like they pass all this legislation that's like, if you're boycott, you can't take, state contracts. If you're boycotting Israel, you like all different sort of resolutions that are like, we stand with the people of Israel, no matter what they do, no matter who they do it to. And so, yeah, I mean, and that's what's funny is like to him, that is what anti-Semitism is like being weary of giving our US tax dollars to Israel, or being able to say, I don't like what that government is doing. That's what constitutes anti-Semitism in, I'm sure, his mind. And so, yeah, I just hope he's not right. Like I said, I hope that he's wrong and that, people who will stand up to the Israeli lobby and people who will go against these unconstitutional moves like tax reform and, just being basically, the funny thing is he doesn't mention anything about like Article 3. Like at first when I read that, I was like A3 in my head. I'm like Article 3, where they're actually like following the Constitution. Of course, that wasn't what he meant, but that's where I went at first. And yeah, I don't know. I guess we're not real Republicans, John.
Let me tell you something here. When I read that, yes. Actually, I have two problems, right? And I keep seeing the Tom Estes's and that Heather Overstreet gal that 97.1 is, I think it's 97.1 is, she's promoting herself to be the next big radio personality, seemingly. And these people put out these short videos, or they put out these posts on X or Facebook or wherever, and they want to talk down to those of us who don't support this, their version or their way of trying to eliminate the income tax. Now, here's the thing they don't address. Even Darren Chappell, I'm getting irritated with Darren Chappell because he's like, it's not going to take a long time. You don't know that. My thing is, how do you know that when you don't even have a plan in place? If they do, they're not bringing it out to show us all. They're just like, have a little faith, people. Trust us. I'm sorry. You can't ever follow the Constitution. Hardly ever. If you do, you probably do it accidentally. And now I'm supposed to trust you after all this time. And I'm sorry, I can't do that. I can't willingly or knowingly trust you when you just do whatever the heck it is you do in there all day. Try to make people's heads explode with your stupidity or whatever. So this whole thing of it's not going to take long, stop being such a Debbie Downer. Well, then show us your plan. Oh, that's right. You don't have one. Again, I did a Friday night rant video like a couple weeks ago. And part of my rant was, that the big thing is there's no real talk of how cutting spending at all. No one's talking about taking a serious look at cutting the spending here in the state of Missouri. No one, and again, no one's shown me a plan. No one's saying anything. It's just that you're just a piece of crap if you don't want to eliminate the state income tax. I never said I didn't want to eliminate the income tax. I just add the caveat that you also have to cut the spending. So let's take, for instance, we cut $4 billion out of spending. We cut $4 billion in spending. Then you equate that to how much you would reduce the income tax by to equal that $4 billion. Boom. They're not going to do that. They're going to shift money around. They're going to play shell game. They're not going to spend any money. And the Amendment 3 thing, you got people out there that are always bragging about their Christianity and acting like if you don't support this Amendment 3, then you really don't want to not murder babies anymore. As Tom mentioned, there's some things in there. It's not eliminating it. It's just cutting out some things. There'll still be babies cut out. So don't you worry, liberals. We'll leave you a little room for error there, seemingly. So it all drives me absolutely bonkers. I'm sick of, I mean, I don't want to be a Republican, but I love also one other thing before I stop ranting here. Why is it that a Missouri LA, someone who works for a Missouri senator, if that's who we think this is, why are people in the state of Missouri, the people in the Capitol going on and railing on about the Israel thing? Are we taking, is Missouri printing money to send to Israel? I have not seen that. Or I just wonder if I know other people have made the statement. You guys can give me your opinions on this as well. Or is AIPAC money leaching itself into through the Republican Party into Missouri? And we're going to start seeing, I mean, we've already seen it. They've already passed a bill about, oh, you can't talk smack about Israel, anti-Semitism, and blah, blah, blah. But is AIPAC money funneling its way into the state of Missouri too? I think it's an important question because they're so entrenched in D.C. that I can see it leaking out into the Republicans in these states across the U.S. and writing these pieces of legislation. And it's all these Republicans talking about don't talk smack about Israel. And it's like, that has nothing to do with what you're doing right now. What you need to do is figure out how to actually find your butt with both hands, a map, and a flashlight. And until you can do that, how about having a big old cup of shut the you-know-what up? So, Tom, do you, I mean, just, this is the theory. I can't prove this. It's just a thought. You think AIPAC money finds its way into Missouri and leads to this type of legislation being written? Or is it simply that because they're doing these things on a national level and the Republicans in the state of Missouri have to follow suit with the Republicans in Washington, D.C. so they can prove they're in the good old boy club? I mean, what do you think's going on here?
Okay, well, first, Estes is the chief of staff of Rick Bratton.
Oh, Jesus.
I just verified that. Second, I don't think, how do I say this? I don't think it's AIPAC money, but I think it's an ideological shift by which it is that a very large percentage of churches in the United States has bought into this thought process that the nation that blesses Israel will be blessed. And we've heard that for decades, but I think that ideological stance is becoming pretty much mainstream in the vast majority of religions in the United States. And if you dare, and if you dare make the comment about how the Israeli government is doing things wrong, then somehow that argument is, well, you just hate Jews. Well, no, I didn't say a word about Jews. I mean, that would be like if I criticize my own government and then someone says, well, you just hate Americans. Well, no, I don't hate Americans either. I'm just pointing out the fact that my government is doing things that are in complete disregard of how it is that the Constitution says they're to be done, and it's in complete disregard of how the people want it to be done.
Yeah, that's a solid point. And you know, it is interesting right now as I peruse the social medias at points during the day that I do see. Lately, I've seen more people, not a whole lot more, but more than I'm used to seeing, complaining about how the legislature in Missouri is just, it's omnibus bill after omnibus bill after omnibus bill. Their bills suck. They have no traction. So what they do is just to figure out a way to stuff it in there. I'm happy to see more people complaining about this. I really am. I hope to see a lot more people complain about this. I just hope that the the people who aren't tolerating that type of behavior anymore, that translates to election time where there's not, oh, I have to vote Republican or the Democrat wins, because clearly there's not a lot of difference between these people at times. So I hope that gets people in the hunt for those who will serve and understand their role as a legislator in the state of Missouri. Now, I don't know if that's going to happen, but I have seen more complaining. I have seen a whole lot of people, generally people who are very pro-Republican, who do not like the way they're doing the income tax elimination. And that makes me happy. I hope we see a lot more, because some of these people, the cuck Republicans, the Republicans, if you might say, seemingly think this is just, oh man, we got this. We're going to pass this. Now, also, I want to get both your thoughts on this, because it has come out. And remember, they did this with Medicaid expansion here a few years ago, that the governor is thinking about moving the vote on the income tax elimination from November up into the same time as the August primaries. So, Tom, your thoughts on that real quick, and we'll go to Brandon. I can see him doing that, hoping that maybe with fewer people, they'll get the majority. But your thoughts on that?
Well, to be honest with you, that is the governor's authority. So whether he puts it in August or whether he puts it in November, and whatever mindset that you want to attach to it, it is fair game.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact is, that is the governor's decision to make. It would be much easier, I think, to get one of them to pass if it was in August. I'm not exactly certain we want too many constitutional amendments on the November ballot, because we know people are stupid. We also know that there is going to be, because I think there will be an onslaught of, I don't want to call it a blue wave in November, but I think the Trumpian in the White House and his minions have pretty much done enough that I think it's going to mobilize Democrats, and you are going to find a good percentage, maybe not Missouri, but you will find a good percentage of Republicans who just don't get reelected, or the seat that's now vacant will slide onto the blue side instead of the red side. But, you know, I guess to the governor's thought process is, which one of the constitutional amendments does he want to see in the Constitution? And that may determine whether or not which one goes on the August ballot and which one goes on the November ballot.
Brandon, your thoughts?
So my thought might be a little bit different. So kind of to Tom's point, I think that the Republicans are worried about November for sure. And so if you move up the Amendment 3 to August, then the people who would have been motivated to go in November might not be as motivated to go. So you might drive the turnout from, because, you know, if the Republicans don't care who the Democrats are putting in their own primary. So if there's a high turnout on primary day because their Amendment 3 is on the ballot, means nothing to the Republicans. It would help them out in November to not have that lingering over them, because that will drive out turnout for the Democrats. I don't know if turnout for the Democrats in November is going to be too much higher, as much as I think Republican turnout is going to be down. I think Republicans have no idea how much, like, the right-leaning independent voter is just totally turned off by, like Tom said, Trump and his lackeys. And the, you know, gas at right outside, there's a Quick Trip right outside my house. Gas is at $4.40 a gallon, and the president is a Republican. And so everybody knows that no matter what is really the cause, even though this is 100% Trump's fault, like, people associate high prices with the president and the party that's in power. And so not going to be a good look there. So yeah, my thought process, not necessarily is that they're trying to win these votes, because I'm sure they want to. It might be to protect themselves in November by moving one up and not having that higher turnout come in November. Now, it could also be that they just think it'll pass easier in August. But if you've got a more motivated turnout for Democrats, I don't see how that necessarily is going to move the needle as much, unless they're just assuming that Democrats in general don't turn out for primaries the way Republicans will.
Yeah, I just wondered with the income tax elimination when he was considering moving that to August, which I figured he had the power, but that wasn't that's not my issue. I mean, it would be if he wasn't able to do that, but my issue was, is he going to move the income tax elimination thing to the ballot in August because he thinks it has a better chance of sliding through and getting the majority votes? Now, if you base it solely off what you see on the internet, which is not a good way to live your life, by the way, but if you did, to me, looking at it, I don't see it having popular support. I see a lot of Republicans or people that consider themselves Republicans and a lot of Democrats completely against the income tax elimination. Now, both sides have their against it. Democrats are like, this is going to kill poor people. They're going to pull the poor people card. And Republicans are like, I've seen people like, this hurts people on fixed incomes because the sales tax is going to be higher, yada, yada, yada. Okay. I just remember the Medicaid expansion thing being slid up earlier in the year, and it passed pretty overwhelmingly, if I'm not mistaken. And it's because the Democrats got everybody to come out and vote. Now, I will say this. If you listen to Jess Piper, and if you believe what Jess Piper says, man, the Republicans are going to have a heck of a time in state houses here in Missouri. Like, the blue wave's going to show up, and there's going to be Republicans losing their seats. And if you listen to her, like, she's speaking to huge crowds everywhere across the state and across the country, apparently. If you listen to Jess Piper, like, Missouri Republicans are in real trouble right now, and the Democrats are going to be winning. Now, would I be surprised if a couple Democrats maybe took a Republican seat because in the area it's kind of 50-50 and Republicans win by a slight percentage point in those districts? Maybe. But where it's generally just red through most, I don't see Democrats coming in and just wiping the floor with Republicans, because we have too many people who just vote for, as Tom would say, the red team all the time. But yeah, I'm interested to see how he's going to treat this income tax elimination ballot issue. I do agree with you on the A3 and A4 thing, but the income tax thing, I think he'll move it up to August because he thinks it's going to be an easier way of pushing it through. I just want to know, again, I want to know what the real agenda here is, because Republicans clearly in this state do not care about being fiscally responsible. That's blatantly obvious. So I'm just trying to figure out why they're really trying to do this, because they don't have a real clear plan, like government generally doesn't. And they talk a big game, but I don't see much intelligence on their side coming out and really winning people over. So I don't know. It'll be an interesting thing. I hope that it fails miserably. My only concern is that how many times, like the gas tax, how many times they're going to try to keep whipping this back up, in another 2 years and another election, trying again and trying again. Now, they can't, fortunately for us, as much as maybe the Hancock Amendment isn't the greatest thing since sliced bread, but it does have a little bit of protections in it. The nice thing is they can't just, they could try, but they can't just shut off the Hancock Amendment. It has to go through a vote of the people. That's our only saving grace. They can't just, and to me, and I think Tom's made this point, and Tom, you can reiterate your point here in a second. I think Tom and I feel the same way about the gas tax, because they say it doesn't violate the Hancock Amendment because it's only 2.5 cents a year. But if you total those up, it does go over the limit that the Hancock Amendment sets forth, and they just found a workaround. Would you agree with that, Tom? Is that kind of the same page you were on with that?
Well, I think the gas tax absolutely was a violation of the Hancock Amendment, because they didn't rename it anything else. And all of the additions, all the annual increases were in the same piece of legislation. So it's not like they did one year, then one the next year. Then, I mean, they did that on paper, but they didn't do that. It all passed at the same time in one legislative session. And I've heard Mike Moon make the case, and I'm not in agreement with him on this, that the whole reason it didn't violate the Hancock Amendment is because they added an amendment to it, which then allowed you to opt out of paying that tax. And of course, you got to save all your gas receipts, and then you got to turn them in, and you got to do all those other different things. But I think the very basis of the bill, the fact that they added 2.5 cents in year 1, 2.5 cents in year 2, 2.5 cents in year 3, 2.5 cents in year 4, 2.5 cents in year 5, absolutely is in complete opposition to the verbiage of how the Hancock Amendment says things must be done.
Yeah, I would like to add to that too, because when they were pushing this through, it's around COVID time. Gas prices were way cheaper because people weren't driving, so we had a surplus of fuel, and there were people bringing up the fact that, like, hey, if Biden gets in office, and depends on what his environmental things he wants to do, and the executive decisions or executive orders he puts out or whatever, could cause gas prices to spike. Now you're adding more money onto that, and they're just they don't want to hear that argument. And then I guess they think when Trump gets in the office, then the gas prices will come back down and we won't have to worry about it. But now we're seeing, because of our foreign policy, gas prices are spiking, and then they've added a few cents onto it, right? And it's just like, but of course they're not going to take any accountability for that. They're going to be like, well, we didn't add that much. We just added, our little bit in, and then the feds screwed things up and yada, yada, yada. And now the gas prices are higher. But yeah, you're definitely not helping with the extra possibly 10 cents a gallon that's been added on, because you're a bunch of greedy a-holes. Now, and that's the other thing I wanted to bring up about the income tax elimination, because when people like this, and these people in Jefferson City have these grandiose plans which are poorly laid out, they act like the federal government spending will never get bad enough, or we won't have some kind of financial crisis where the feds will go, we can't fund you like we used to. So let's say we have an even greater financial crisis than we have now, and that throws a wrench into the states getting their money. How do they propose to work this out? Because it's messing with Missouri's finances. So if you're in the middle of this poorly planned exercise and suddenly you have a financial crisis on your hands, how's the state going to deal with it? And that's what ticks me off. Same way with the gas tax. They just act like the feds never screw anything up and get prices. You get massive inflation or whatever. They just act like that never happens, and everything just stays the same. It's all static. It just never fluctuates at all. I'm like, I don't know what kind of haze or curtains you're peeking through when you're looking at the world, but they're all rose-colored. Everyone's wearing rose-colored glasses in Jefferson. Not everyone, but the majority of them are. And there seemingly is no thought of what are the feds' plans? What's the federal government got in hand? And I would love it if the state of Missouri, in its actions or the way it tries to behave, that there was enough sovereignty there that they're like, who cares what the feds do? We got our own thing going on. That's clearly not the case. So that's another thing that bothers me about that. And you guys can add your 2 cents onto that.
Well, I like your point that like they don't have the plan. To me, that's like the biggest part of this thing, is that like the legislative body is asking the people that give them their power in the first place to trust, even though we have a Hancock Amendment, because we don't trust them with our budget. Like we don't trust them with our taxes and to not raise them, willy nilly. So we have the Hancock Amendment where these votes have to go to the people. And in regards to this vote, sure, the vote initially goes to the people, but it's still like it's brazen to think that, like, because other states have no income tax. And so you just look at like where their sales tax levels are at, because you've got states like Nevada who make a lot of their money off of tourism and gambling. And so they don't have an income tax, but they have another tax revenue. And same thing with oil in Alaska. But when it comes to Missouri, we don't have like a set thing that's going to set us apart. So now you've got the sales. Now, when you've got the addition with eliminating the income tax and adding all of these sales taxes, to trust a legislative body that, like you said, has shown us no ability to be fiscally responsible, to ever work towards eliminating spending. So, or not eliminating, cutting spending. And so, yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if like the people at the top introducing this know what this is going to look like and are just afraid to say it, because a lot of the rhetoric just makes it sound like they're eliminating the tax. Like, you have to dig deeper to find out that it's actually going to raise sales tax by a bunch and that it's going to be at best tax neutral. The pitch is that we're eliminating the taxes because we're looking out for you. And I guess maybe they're hoping that works. But something tells me that, like, deep down, the people pushing for this have a plan and they know what sales tax is going to look like, and they don't want to say it for a reason.
Tom?
I have to agree with Brandon. I honestly think that, well, if you read it, you honestly think that they're eliminating income tax. You don't realistically realize that they're increasing sales tax. And either they have no plan, it's the trust me bro plan, which will come later, or they already have started on the foundation of the home. They drew out the schematics and they know where they want to put the piers, and they know how far everything is spaced out, but they don't want to let the people know that, oh, this may get a little bit uglier than what we think it's going to get. And the less you know, the better off you are, and the better off we are, because then you'll pass it, and then we'll get our way. And we really don't care if you complain there afterwards, because we can say, well, this is what you wanted. You voted for this.
Yeah, dude, it just drives me. It drives me absolutely nuts. Here's another thing that's driving me nuts. I'm seeing a lot of posts on Facebook, in particular on the Owensville, Missouri Talk page, about how the feds and the state are considering decreasing funding for education. I thought I saw a figure earlier today that for the state it was like $190 million less. Okay, it says public schools will not, if you believe this post, public schools will not get $190 million dictated by the 2024 education law, but private schools will get an additional $10 million. No general cost of living pay increase for state employees for the first time since fiscal 2021. Now, here's my problem, and I want you guys' input on this, of course, is what frustrates me is that the school bond didn't pass for the third time here in Owensville for our school district. 3 times in a row, they lost. And they're getting quite butthurt. And they're getting butthurt enough where at some point, they're going to have to drive a full truck of Preparation H pads into that school district to cut the soreness down of everyone's buttholes. But now people want to dunk on the people who voted no on the school bond. And here's my problem. And here's the thing they don't want to talk about. They just want to talk about they're not going to get this $15 million school bond and keep that tax levy the way it is now. for however many freaking years. That's what's ruining education. Like the $15 million was going to books no, it wasn't. It was going to a performing arts center, stuff for athletics. That's what the majority of it's going to, or school safety. Nothing about books and education. So it's like, the folks that are out here and they're so mad, and it's like, okay, well, here's a problem that I'm having, is the fact that you don't want to reconcile with yourself and others around you in the same state of mind that public education is a failing institution. And your solution to a problem is the norm. Keep throwing money at it until it gets better. Just keep increase the spending. Come on, keep going. Throw a couple another $1 billion at it. Certainly at some point our kids are going to get smarter. It's like, I don't know. If you just go by and you brush the money across their forehead, suddenly they're able to read and do math better. I've never seen it. I'd love to see that, because I'll go to the bank and say, can you just rub some hundreds on my head and make me smarter? But God almighty, it is insane the amount of people who now they were all these old heads didn't want to vote and complaining about their taxes. I'm like, what are we doing here? What exactly is happening that you are more than happy to just keep getting taxed and increase levy, when again, the state of Missouri and every state assessor in this state, or every county assessor in this state, got literally basically threatened that if you don't increase your taxes your assessments at 14.99%, you will lose your funding, you'll lose your budget, you could lose your job, or you won't get any of the taxes coming to your county that get paid out. And so they're already getting a personal property tax increase of 15% across every man, woman, child in this area that possibly either don't have kids in the school district because they've graduated, don't have kids at all, or have kids in the school. The school's going to get an increase in funding because the state and in the tax commission, the state tax commission, and some NGO organization came in and made up new rules. And at the barrel of a gun said, do it or you're done. And no one's talking about this stuff. But since you voted you didn't vote for a school bond, we're going to be the reason the school fails or the education fails. But you go on the website, you go on the interwebs, and you look at our average GPA, which some people were saying was 1.7 or 2.0. And I'm supposed to believe that if we had enough people that voted that $15 million bond into effect, that the GPAs would just rise because there's a theater in the school. I don't know how much more retarded you can be sometimes. This kind of stuff really blows my mind. And as Tim says in the comments here, Albert Einstein says you can't judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, in reference to standardized testing in school systems. Anyway, that's a good point. I'd like both your inputs on this, because even this happens all across the state. If a school bond fails, suddenly then the school's going to fail and the kids are going to be hungry and starving and just sitting there withering away at their desk and not learning anything because they didn't upgrade the lights on the football field and didn't get their performing arts center. I wish I could understand their logic. I can't. It makes my head hurt, and I feel my IQ going down the drain. So, Brandon, if you want to interject here, Tom, give me your input on it. It ticks me off.
John, I think you could be wrong here. I think if all of the students of Owensville High School had to watch a production of Alabama, they would just be so inspired to come back to school. They would be energized. Fresh lights in the football field. Nothing makes me want to learn math more than having fresh lights in the football field. but no, to your point, for real, to your point about like, yeah, like you said, we're not getting any pushback on the fact that the state is implementing a sweeping 15% increase in all property taxes, and then, you know, obviously threatening counties that don't sign on to that, which is you know, should reflect poorly on the state government and is not as hard as it should. Like there was some news stories picking it up at the time when they were fighting it, but now that it's passed, now that the winds are blown away, no one seems to be talking about it anymore, and it is a big deal because it's just the way that the state flexed its power over local governments, and should always make people weary about trusting higher authority over your local authority to make a decision about raising your taxes and what's proper for the community and what's going to make people, you know, because like we were talking about earlier, we got inflation through the roof. You got gas at $4.50 a gallon. Like you never know what the global market's going to look like, especially with a guy like Donald Trump, we got tariffs and then we're going to have more tariffs and the tariffs are illegal. So now we got to give that money back to the businesses. And so, yeah. And with regards to the school bond, I feel like what they're doing is probably just buttering up the community for the next time they try to push something like this. They're getting ahead of it by saying, well, of course our test scores are low. You guys keep refusing to give us money, and they'll keep running the same rhetoric, hoping that eventually they've softened you guys up enough to pass their legislation. Even though, like you're saying, it's not for increasing test scores. It's not for making the high school students and middle school students, like all students really, but like making people ready for the next stage or ready for like preparing them for life. No. It's about a performing arts center in a super small town in a high school. So yeah, I think they're just trying to get you ready for the next vote by being like, look how dumb you guys are.
Probably.
All right, I'm going into boomer mode.
Go for it, Tom.
I mean, I graduated in 1981, excuse me. So I go back and I look at the education that I had from basically 70s, late 60s, 70s through the early 80s. And I can't recall too much of it. Now, granted, yeah, it gave me some math concepts. It taught me how to read and write English in cursive. And then, you know, we home educated our kids. So that kind of removed me from the education system and understanding how our education system works. But then I look at how much I've learned just in the last 10 years on my own research. I think what we have is we have a system that's set up to educate everybody in the same manner, no matter what they're interested in. You just don't find people like the MIT graduate Thomas Massey every day of the week. But when you do find those kids, you do need to be able to excel them. And I'm not exactly sure that our education system is designed or set up in that manner to benefit those kids who are quicker. It seems like it's more designed to hold those kids back, to make it so that the kids that are slower don't feel bad that they can't learn as fast as the people like the Thomas Masseys, the people who have a functioning brain that just it defies belief. And I'm still waiting for the high school in the state of Missouri to nickname their football team the Post Turtles.
You know, I want to talk about a comment here that's left by Tim. He's kind of not wrong here. It says the sad truth is winning championships drives revenue to the area. Look at Blair Oaks. They're a winning school district. Everyone wants to be there so bad it even drives up housing prices. So if they build these athletic, performing arts, etc., it'll drive more people and money into the Owensville area. He's not completely wrong. Here's my problem with that. If you're going to take your kid into a school district because they have all these championship teams, but you're not looking at the education of the kids, that's a freaking problem. That's a big problem. It's like parents are living vicariously through their children. Now, of course, you want to see your child succeed in whatever they do, right? If they're playing sports, you want them to do well. And you want them to succeed in anything they do in life, generally, unless it's becoming a cartel member, then maybe not, right? Like, I don't want my kid to be a cartel member. But if that's what the priority is for a parent, is looking at the athletics and saying, this city's got a lot of football championships, and you choose a school because of that, then to me, your priorities are way off. And again, it's like you sucked at athletics or you were on a losing team and you're like, I want my kid to be on a winning team. Okay. Now that might teach them a couple life skills about, being a team player, working with others or whatever. But how many kids that do well in high school sports go on to be great college players and then great pro players? Like, that percentage is really low. The chances of you succeeding and moving up from the high school level to the pro level are pretty slim. You've got to be a fantastic player, and you have to keep up that motivation and that drive throughout your sports career to make it to that level. Most of the kids won't. So, I bet you I could go out there and I could meet somebody who was on a state football championship team and they're working in a factory. And I bet you could find a lot of those who are not these financial gurus with millions of dollars because they won a high school sports championship. I'm not putting that down. That's a great accomplishment. But as far as getting you farther ahead in life, it just reminds me of Married with Children. Al Bundy, he ran the football and scored, and he worked in a shoe store. Kind of an Al Bundy type of thing, right? I don't know. It just really bugs me that parents may choose athletics of over the education of their kids, and that just bugs me to death. So I just wanted to put my 2 cents in there on that.
Well,
Brandon, go ahead.
yeah. So when it comes to specifically, like, I'm not trying to, tear into the, like, I'm not trying to like disagree with this argument in a completely, but when you've got a town like Owensville, you've got so many other high schools around there to choose from, and especially ones like Washington, Missouri, they put a ton of money into their football program. They've got like the Jumbotron in the back, and they do like the Washington High, and they have a huge, massive home crowd bleachers that fill up almost every Friday. And the team is average at best most years. And so and it's different at like the college level too, because you have recruitment, right? There's not a ton you can do for recruiting at a public high school. Even private high schools have an easier time, because what they'll do is they'll go into like inner cities or rural areas, and they'll be like, hey, we'll give you a full ride scholarship to our really nice high school if you come and play football or basketball or whatever for us. And so you can kind of build a program that way. But to build a program for a football team that is going to continually like win championships means that you've got to fund for like not just a little bit better, like way better facilities, because you're asking people to move to the district. So you've got to build like amazing workout facilities, an amazing football field with like all the lights. Then you've got to get a team of really good coaches, which is expensive to begin with. Like sometimes the varsity football coach, he'll like teach a couple gym classes and gets paid the ton of money to just be the football coach. And that's at a high school that is like an average high school. That's not even like a good, serious one. And so to build a winning championship program that's going to make people want to move to your district, it's going to take upwards of $1 million+ And then it's also going to take a decade to get that culture in place where you're going to have parents moving to Owensville to play football. And so, I mean, it's a pipe dream of a venture at best. So like, I'm not saying that it doesn't happen, because you'll have like, there are like Blue Springs is an area where people move to because of the football. Like you can do it. It's just so hard. And like to start from nothing in a small town like Owensville, I'm just not seeing that being the payoff, especially like when we're talking about a place that in its nature is to educate the kids. So you're going to make like an all-in investment on the football team for this venture to try to draw people into the city and grow the town. That's a crazy plan, in my opinion.
Tom?
You know, I did a Wikipedia search on the place where I was raised, which was Shippensburg, Pennsylvania. It was settled in 1730. It incorporated in 1819. The town's 2020 population was 5,478. So I would bet in the early 80s, it was probably maybe 1,000 less. But then I also done an AI search where I asked it, have there been any professional athletes to graduate from Shippensburg High School? This is the answer. Based on the provided search context, there is no information listed about professional athletes who graduated from Shippensburg Area High School. Now, you can bet your bottom end that if there was a professional athlete who graduated from that high school, it would be at least on their Wikipedia page, or it would be at least somewhere within the confines that an AI could go, oh, we graduated so-and-so in the class of, 1990 or 1991. So you're looking at a town that's probably the size of Owensville, because I've been through Owensville and I remember what Shippensburg looks like. And based on my searches, there has not been a single professional athlete that has graduated from that high school. Now, there may have been some who went on to play really good careers in college, but if a parent is looking for the application of their child being the next, I don't know, Tom Brady, you're probably not going to get that lucky.
Yeah, I just I don't think you can find anything from. I don't think we've ever had anyone from Owensville go on to be some superb. I know we had. I think one gal. I don't remember how many years ago. She was pretty good college player. She came back and actually, I think she. Well, now she's a coach at a. She was a coach at another college. She was pretty talented, but that's the only name that comes to mind. The only player around here that I know of that absolutely went pro was out of Borgia High School, which is a private school in Washington, and he went to Mizzou, played at Mizzou. I think he was running back in special teams. And then he went on to play for the Detroit Lions for so many years on their special teams, kickoff return, kick coverage, and all that. Now, this is just bringing back memories because one year Owensville and Borgia had to play in districts, and Borgia had a great team. We broke their quarterback's leg in that game, and this is how petty some of the people back in the day were from Borgia. So they break his leg. Defensive lineman hit him high and one hit him low, broke his leg. So the ambulance is backing up onto the track, and his parents come out and they're like, he is not riding in an Owensville ambulance. It's like, wow. Yes, because in halfway to the Washington hospital, we're going to push him out the back. You ignorant a-holes. But anyway, he was in that year. I think that was 95, 96. Anyway. Might have been earlier than that. But he was one of those like nice guys, like heck of an athlete, great runner, harder than heck to tackle. And some of the boys on the team said, didn't matter how hard you hit that guy. He'd bounce up and he'd be like, great hit, number 57, and go back to the huddle. He was never rude, but his quarterback was a complete and utter a-hole. He was an arrogant, you know what? And then, yeah, they cracked through the line and drilled him and broke his leg. And no one felt sorry for him because he was such a jerk. But anyway, that just brought back a memory of me going to watch high school football once in a while back in the day. So, Tom, is there any other topic that comes to mind, especially Missouri related, that you would like to bring up at this point?
Well, I think the we're now at the part in our legislative session that we're going to see bills that contain everything under the sun thrown into them. Today, listening to Mike Moon and Bryant Wolfen discussing the state budget, I think if I'm not mistaken, Mike had said something about they've got it down to like 50 billion. As I know, got it down to 50 billion. As compared to I think it was 53.5 billion that the governor asked for. So I'm not exactly sure that's an actual savings or if that's just a reduction in the rate of what it was that they were going to appropriate anyway. But yeah, if you ask me, once we get to the point where we're back down around what we were spending before COVID, that's when I'll be happy. Then you can go and play around with the budget, and you can start implementing some things to move a tax here, move a tax there. I'm fine with that. But until you work out the thought process that we're spending $50 billion, I'm sorry, you're not even making an attempt to draw what your house is going to look like. You're still at the trust me, bro stage. And I've got enough years reading legislation that I don't trust you at all, period.
Well, and Tom, you've got a double whammy going for you because you don't trust them, bro. And then you have that, that genetic trait that you don't have to be liked by anybody. You don't have that urge to be liked by anyone. So you got a double whammy going on there as far as this goes. When someone
I don't have the Glenn Beck gene.
Yeah, you don't care if Israel hates you or not, so it's all good. Yeah, I think I was talking to Tim, my coworker and friend Tim at work the other day, and I said, the government does something, and sometimes it should surprise me, but now it doesn't anymore, like at all. Whatever happens in this state, it doesn't even shock me. I'm like, I mean, I might not have read that in the tea leaves, but I'm not shocked by it either, right? It's one of those things where they come up with this, they come out, and I mean, it's like when these guys got these diesel engines in their trucks, and they romp the gas, and there's just black smoke pouring out of the back end of that pickup, and it's like that tailpipe is connected to my anus, and they're trying to blow that much smoke up my hind end and get me to try to buy in to what they're selling. And I'm just like, no, I literally have not given me any reason. Again, Brian Wolfen and Mike Moon, I have some hope in those guys because they put forth an effort, and they seemingly really try to follow the oath that they took, which is to uphold and defend the Constitution. The majority of them, no. And I just feel like at some point I'm going to have to invent like smoke-proof underwear where it doesn't matter how much smoke they try to blow up my behind. It's not even going there. It'll just get rejected. It'll blow right back in their face and go, good luck. Go try that somewhere else when somebody who doesn't think. That's what kind of cracked me up about Spike Cohen too, when he said he was neurospicy. And I think we can definitely put Tom in the neurospicy thing where he just doesn't look at something and goes, he actually thinks it through and goes, what's the actual outcome of this going to be? And not what they said they want to happen. What's the outcome of this going to be? And can we talk about this for a minute? Because that was an interesting way that he put it last night. But when the three of us or whoever we might have on here are discussing these, especially in Missouri bills that don't even come close to following the Constitution, and Tom comes on here and much more eloquently details how it offends or goes against the Constitution. And I just want to ask you guys' opinion on this. Like, do you ever see a point where we can get more people to grasp it instead of like their eyes crossing or getting that deer in the headlight look? Like, do you ever see a point where we're like laying out the reasons that people should absolutely be against something and everybody's like, I totally get that. Yes, that's great. Instead of the whoa, dude. And instead of basing things on emotions, that they base things on logic. And Tom, I'll let you go first here, but do you ever see us getting to the point where maybe more people start using logic and critical thinking instead of basing their reaction or what they support on emotion alone?
I think people lack the capacity to be able to critical think, and I'm not too sure that's something that occurred in our education system or if that's something that occurred before social media. Because you got to remember, before social media, you had a limited amount of people that you hung out with, that you talked to. It's not like you just randomly went to some shopping mall across the state and started talking to people. Well, social media now gives you that availability of doing that. So I think it has widened the parameters of what it is that people actually got used to, and you're literally seeing things that are outside the parameters of your thinking, and you're going, man, them people are stupid. But on their side of the screen, they're looking at us going, man, them people are stupid. I mean, I had a conversation earlier today about, following the Constitution and whether or not you're principled enough to do it. And one of the individuals I was talking to said, well, following the Constitution is like a bad marriage. If you don't like the woman that you're married to, or if the woman doesn't like the husband she's married to, you just go down to the court, you get it annulled, and you move on to the next one. And I think that's the thinking and the thought process that we've gotten into over the years, that a person's word is no longer a person's word. If John, you come down to my house and say, well, I'll finish this wall for you for $100, and then 4.5 years later, I'm still looking at a wall and there's nothing yet has been done to it. Granted, I haven't given you any money, or if I did, I was stupid enough to give you the money. But the fact of the matter is a person's word is no longer their bond. And I feel that people like a Mike Moon, people like a Bryant Wolfen, I mean, not right now, I'm looking at the endorsements for Freedom Principle Missouri and how they're endorsing all the conservative candidates, of which some of these are decent people. They've got Michael Davis on here. They've got Bob Titus. They've got Bert Whaley. All three of them were in the top 5. They've got Holly Jones. They got Phil Okerling. They've got Bryant Wolfen, Jeff Fernetti. Let's see. They've got Nick Schroer for the Senate. They've got Ben Brown. They've got Jill Carter. Well, some of these people are so wishy-washy, it's not even funny. But this is also an organization that, the Freedom Principle that is, that keeps telling me that if I'm not in favor of Amendment 3, then I'm just in favor of killing babies. When in reality, their endorsed Amendment 3 will continue killing babies, but somehow they don't look at it that way. And I think we've lost the availability of being able to critically think. And then we've also lost the availability of actually looking at somebody when they do think critically to go, I've never thought about it that way. At one point in time, I was pro death penalty big time. But over time, my thought process has completely changed as I've tuned into different podcasts. I've watched different movies. I've seen different scenarios where the governmental system has completely corrupted itself to the point where it's just looking to convict somebody. And I've completely changed my thought process on the death penalty. But I think people also need to be given the opportunity to see the error of their ways when there is an error of their ways. And hopefully they'll come around to the point where they'll start thinking about their argument in a 360-degree circle. This is what made Rush Limbaugh so great. He argued one half of the circle. And when it finally dawned on me that he was only arguing on the side that he agreed with, he was completely ignoring the other side, that's kind of when I figured out that, oh, this isn't a one-sided thing. This topic that he's talking about actually has a 360-degree circle around it, and I need to educate myself on the other side of the circle just as well as the side that I'm already educated on to see if my way of thinking is correct or not.
Yeah.
I have a slightly different take on it. Not that I disagree with what Tom said in too much regard, but I think the root cause of what is creating a less critical thinking society is not necessarily social media and the way that you interact with people. I think it's that it's more about like the way technology, I've talked about this plenty of times on the show. It's the way technology has not only made everything easier, where like no one's worried about food, no one, you know what I mean? The people who when you add in like the social benefits, like with the safety net benefits, the social programs, almost nobody in America lives below the poverty line anymore. So you've got people who can comfortably, for the most part, comfortably feed themselves, comfortably have a shelter, and then everyone, even the government, will give out free cell phones, and then all you need is a couple $100 for a TV or whatever, and then you're entertained endlessly. And so I think that's part of it too, is that it's just people don't have a need. Like back in the 1700s, 1800s, decisions like that politicians made had real impact. Like they were affecting your way of life in a very significant way. Whereas today, people do feel the impact of political decisions. Don't get me wrong. But for the most part, there's not like a general worry about like, will I be able to eat tomorrow? Like until we get to that point, I think once we get there, you'll have a lot more serious critical thinking. But I think people have it a lot easier nowadays. So they just don't take the time to do it. Like we've just created a lazy society based on how easy technology has made everything.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that too, because I think back in the day, generally that long ago, if they made a horrible decision, right, the impact was felt more immediately. And now if you pass a CARES Act and pump $6 trillion into the economy, it's 6 months to a year before the inflation starts hitting, right? And then so those two things don't get tied together necessarily by a lot of people in society. They just look at greedy corporations and billionaires, right? But they forgot about the money printing. And everything is so, again, with the data centers, the flock cameras and everything else, because generally as a society as a whole, we do have it easier than a lot of third world countries. And we haven't been attacked per se by a nation trying to come on our soil, and we don't have bombs dropping on us all day and artillery raining down on our heads. So it's comfortable for us to just say, well, the fighting is over there. Who gives a crap, right? We can subsidize wars because our boys aren't necessarily dying by the thousands. So we get comfortable with it. And because most people don't see story after story after story about a mass surveillance state keeping an eye on everything you do, and now putting these things in cars that just says we'll disable it if you look impaired or you do this or do that, you won't, the kill switch in the car, you just won't drive. And it's happening slowly enough that until it's too late, then it dawns on people. You get to a point where the government says one day, no one's driving today because there's a climate catastrophe, or there's too many carbon emissions yesterday, so no one's driving to work. No one's car is going to start. Then they start freaking out. But now it's too late. It's too freaking late. You should have been paying attention when they put the kill switches in the car. Or come to think about it, when they wanted a cell phone in everybody's hand, cool. Now we have a way of spying and listening to you, every single person's conversations. We just built a surveillance system by handing out these smartphones and getting them into the hands of as many people as we possibly could. Now we have the flock cameras, which just make me so inflamed and so irritated. And you know, you see the stories where like, oh, this guy tried to kidnap someone and they caught him on a flock. They got his license plate on a flock camera, and law enforcement was able to apprehend the person. And the flock camera systems get brought up constantly in news articles. What a way to soften the blow. So you get the majority of the American public to believe that, oh, they're there to catch criminals, not that they're putting them everywhere so they can track your every movement. You don't notice it until it's too late. I literally had somebody at work today who's like, I don't know why people are getting so upset about flock cameras. Like, I don't care if they're watching me or not. And I'm like, I just kind of stood there. I think Tim was in the office with me, and he was like, what did you just say? I wasn't even going to argue with the dude. I didn't have the energy to go, what do you mean you don't care if they're watching? Like, what is that? What kind of, I'm not doing anything wrong. And it just brought me back to the Patriot Act post 9/11. And I had so many people say, I don't care. I'm not doing anything wrong. What do you mean? You mean to tell me that throughout the whole history of this government, especially in the last 20 to 30 years, you don't think this government of ours has the will to abuse their power? Are you out of your mind? You think they're trustworthy? But come election time, if you got to endorse your candidate and you got to beat the other side, and when they're abusing the system, it's horrible. But when your party's in power, they're doing it for the right reasons. And you're just incentivizing the government to go, these people clearly don't care. They're not paying attention because we've got them divided so badly. They can't pay attention to the ever increasing amount of encroachments that we throw at them. But yes, to your point, Brandon, we are so comfortable for the most part. And the changes are not so abrupt as to cause a sudden, everything to come to a screeching halt. And people go, whoa, what are you doing? The frog in the boiling pot of water. Just turn up the heat slowly. And by the time they realize you're getting cooked, it's too freaking late. That is disturbing. I don't know how you, to your point, if you go to the grocery store and there's no food on the shelves, that's when a doo-doo is going to hit the fan. But it's like, this was coming. People tried to tell you, and you just looked at us like we just came out of a ship that landed in the middle of a farmland somewhere. And we were all aliens with big googly eyes and ray guns. And we were trying to anally pro-ball you, and you didn't want to cooperate. I don't know. It just blows my mind. And I guess that's what sucks about being neurospicy, is that you look all this and you're like, this is not good. People are like, I don't care. I'm not doing nothing wrong. I'm not selling drugs or kidnapping kids. Somebody had an interesting post earlier today that said that we have this surveillance system. It's funny we have this surveillance system. We have these child trafficking rings. We have all this crime, and these people are not brought to bear for their crimes. Is it because they're being run by the people who run all the different criminal rings? It's probably because that's the whole spy apparatus is controlled by those people. That's why those people aren't brought to bear and brought to justice. Very valid point. Very valid point. I'm like, yep, that was well worded. Tom, your thoughts?
I'm going to pass. I'll stay out of trouble.
Well,
now, how could you possibly get in trouble, Tom?
Because you don't know where my thought process went when you brought that up.
I got
medieval.
The one point I want to make is that I used to have this belief. I was less worried about it because my thought process used to be like, they track all your data, sure, but then they'd have to have an enormous number of people looking like you know what I mean? Like back before, you wouldn't like, obviously they could flag keywords, but as far as like actually analyzing what a conversation was saying, you'd have to have a real person reading it. And it would take, you wouldn't be able to come up with the man hours to track people if you had all this data you're collecting. But now with AI getting better and faster and producing more, these surveillance states are going to need way less people to comb through way more data. And like, obviously, like your buddy was saying, well, I don't do anything wrong, so I don't have anything to hide. Yeah, until like, I don't know, they try to force everyone to get a vaccine through OSHA, and then if you are against it or speak out against it, let's say they make that a misdemeanor crime. Or if you speak out against the 51st state in the Middle East, let's say they make that a misdemeanor crime. No,
Yeah.
I'm only half
Yeah.
joking here. Like, let's
No, I
say they
know.
make that a crime, and then they've got all this data of me saying, oh, I think Israel sucks. I don't think Israel should get our money. I think they commit atrocities. And then all of a sudden, I'm in jail because the government can just easily filter through all of the data with this new technology they have. And so, I mean, we're reaching a point where the technology is catching up with the mass amount of data that the government has, and they're going to be able to basically manipulate it whichever way they want. They're going to be able to pull a file on everybody instantly. It's going to be insane.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just, and I know people in this country be like, man, that won't happen. Okay, then look over across the pond, where we have their king come to our Congress and they call him His Majesty, even though we were supposedly left the crown like 250 years ago. That was weird. And all the No Kings people were clapping for the king. Also, very strange. But look at the UK and the amount of people who were put into jail over a Facebook post, social media post, or because they simply opposed something or they said something out loud. And here come the literal thought police. Now, think about it this way too. If the people out there are like, well, it'll never happen. This country sure does emulate a lot of government policies of a nation that, again, we supposedly left 250 years ago. All the closed circuit televisions or the cameras everywhere. Again, used to be several years ago, if you walked around the streets of London for a day, your picture or video was taken on average of like 230 times. And then New York City and some of these other big cities are like, we want cameras just like them. So you just think it's because it's America that those same abuses won't happen, when literally we seem to look up to the UK and all their governmental policies they create. We seem to look at them and go, man, those guys are really doing something there. I think they got this figured out. I think we can bust these people's chops. And that's something else that drives me nuts. The people, the thought process of, well, it won't happen here. That you should never utter those words again. I don't think, back in the 70s, people ever thought we'd have a mass surveillance system. If you go back to the 50s, 60s, 70s and go, or the 80s and go, we're going to have a mass surveillance system. We're like, no, we're not. That'll never happen in America. And if you bring them forward to the future and go, you might want to go back and tell your buddies to cool it. But that sentence should never be uttered again. It can't happen here. Oh, it can. It is happening. And if you keep that same process and that same thought going in your head all the time, they'll just keep encroaching on you until it gets to the point where it's too late to stop it. And now you've got a size 13 boot on your neck, and it's a big black boot.
What's funny is in the 60s, you had a lot of the Red Scare. And so you had, like, you were encouraged to mass surveil on your neighbors and report anything suspicious. And so they've been sewing the fabric of using security as a means for a mass surveillance state in America for a long time. If anything, this is the culmination of what we've been seeing since pretty much that era, is that, well, to protect you, we have to spy on everything you do. And then, as we saw with McCarthyism, that a lot of innocent people were getting roped into this because he was on a power trip. And so, I mean, the building blocks have been there for years, culminating in this mass surveillance state. And whenever you try to expose it, like when Edward Snowden tried to expose the mass surveillance from the NSA, they'll just force you into exile. And so, like, you can't even mention the mass surveillance state that we absolutely need to protect you, or you will be forced into exile at the threat of a gun.
Tom, we got 10 minutes left, and I want to close out by asking you a question, because I've been hearing this a little bit, and I want your opinion. Now, I don't want to bring age into it. I don't want to seem to be age discriminatory here, but you are my elder.
Well, I'm not a fan of the mass surveillance state, if that's where you're going.
Nope. I know you're not a fan of that, my friend. I've been hearing a lot of talk lately from different folks in the podcast world and stuff, talk about the baby boomers and how the baby boomers are like, oh, these kids today, they suck and blah, blah, blah. But the baby boomers kind of got used to these government safety nets being created and got comfortable with it, didn't fight against it, thought they were great. And, it is true that the people that saved all their lives, that they're older and have savings, the money that they had back then was much more valuable than it is today because of inflation, because of the way the Fed prints money. Their money had more value to it than we do today. And you see the housing prices and all this stuff, and people are like, oh, these kids, they can't be responsible enough to buy a home. It's like, have you seen the house prices? I mean, the houses that they probably been sitting on and living in for 30 years is worth way more than what they paid for it. So they're comfortable. They're like, man, I'd go sell this place. I'll probably make 5 times what I paid for it, or 10 times what I paid for it. So they're comfortable, and they look at it like, I don't know why y'all are complaining. I'm not saying that you feel that way, but do you think there's some truth to that? That as I can't say it, through the generations, Jesus, with the attitudes that change on monetary policy, the economy, everything like that. Do you think that's true, or that lends to it a little bit? I think it does a little bit.
Well, see, I'm at the very, very end of the baby boomers.
Right.
Why I'm even a baby boomer is beyond me, considering I was born in '63. And baby boomers were supposed to be the birth that occurred after the World War II generation came back from fighting in Europe. Well, being born in '63, I'm way after that, so I don't grasp the concept of why I fall into that baby boomer category. But I think what ends up happening is I was alive when Nixon took us off the gold standard.
Mm-hmm.
I was alive back when you had silver certificates, you had gold certificates. That was actual money. And I think what we've slowly done is we've completely gotten away from educating the general public to what it is that policy is doing, what it is that the government's doing. You had a huge percentage of people that got on the gravy boat train with FDR during the 30s and the 40s. And I think they sold patriotism to the point where America, you either love it or leave it. You know, that was a big thing. And then you had the 60s was the live free or die age. It's also the people of the 60s were the question authority types. But somehow when the question authority types got elected and got put into office, all of a sudden they didn't want their authority questioned. And I'm not really sure that the people in that time frame even thought about, well, this house, which now cost me, let's say, $35,000, of which one income family, you realistically could buy a $35,000 home. You could buy a brand new car. You could have 3 children, and you could have a wife that stayed home and made sure that the house was kept tidy and clean and everything else. And that could be done on one income. But through the process of the printing press being fired up, we've completely devalued that little thing that we carry around in our pocket that we call a dollar bill or a $5 bill or a $10 bill, to the point where people that were born before me have no clue that back in the time frame that their houses were ever going to be worth $300,000, $500,000, $750,000. That's a process, I think, that was in reality, it was created because the government would not stop the printing presses, which then just basically devalued the dollar. It created inflation, and now people don't see the relation of how it is that $40,000 house is actually the same $40,000 house. It's just that because there's so much money in circulation, it's now valued at $750,000. And I think Ron Paul did a really good job of trying to educate people on the Federal Reserve. Tom Woods does a really good job on trying to educate people about the Federal Reserve. I think we realistically need to get back to the point where people understand the financial system and what has happened to it. But I don't want to be Debbie Downer, but it's probably too late.
I don't necessarily disagree with that, especially about the too late part. It sucks because, I got, Brandon's got a little kid. I got 2 little grandkids, and I can't imagine what it's going to be like when they graduate, or, whether they're homeschooled to graduate, whatever, and they go out to get a job and they're trying to be self-sufficient. I can't imagine what it's going to be like for them when they get out of school. And it's like, I'd really like to see this ship get turned around, but it's not looking very promising. All right, Brandon, we got just under 4 minutes if you want to close out the show.
Well, I'll try.
Okay.
So in regards to what Tom was saying, I think what bugs me as a young person too is that the young people should be able to gather that what the government has done to the dollar, like it's what the government has done. And instead of having any pushback against the government, it's all about like the millionaires and billionaires, and it's the Bernie Sanders. Like there's too many socialists among the young people. And and again, I do blame the education system in a large way, but at the same time, you've got people who are of voting age, the same age that some of the founding fathers were, not much older or younger than the founding fathers when they founded this country. And so there does have to be a little bit of onus on the young generation of not like, sure, you can talk about how expensive everything is, but if you can't identify why it's so expensive, or at least properly identify why it's so expensive without the generic big corporations and, all the socialists, talking points, then it doesn't do you any justice just complaining about it if you're going to continue that same cycle. Like if the young generation is going to pick up the torch and continue, like eventually they turn into the same type of warmongering, they want to spend all the money on the same things that the last generation spent all that money on and printed all that money on. And there's no real talk about stopping it among young people. And so I do feel for the plight of like, yeah, everything is more expensive, but at the same time, if you're not going to have any actual thought on what's going to fix it in the future and changing course, then all you're really doing is complaining. Like you're noticing and complaining, but you're not actually like saying, everything's too expensive. Like the college is expensive, houses are expensive, but not having any idea why. It does no good.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Tom, you want to give everybody out your information on your show on KSGF and all the other stuff there?
Sure. Generally on Friday mornings between 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. I am on KSGF, of which you can find that on ksgf.com. And I've also started to link those on my Substack page. And except this Friday, I will be on with Nadine at 9 out of Lake of the Ozarks on Damn Radio. So I have no idea what what the main topics of conversation will be with her, although I did hear her say she's wanting to go down some rabbit holes. So that could be something that might be detrimental to her health, because there's some really weird rabbit holes that I have been down in my lifetime. So, and a few that I have done recently. But yeah, you can catch me there. I forget what my Substack is. I think it's legislation versus Constitution, something like that. But I will link it in the show notes at some point when it pops up on YouTube if people want to find it there. And I don't ask for money. I just happen to write things that I find eventful, and I also try to write things about legislation that's working its way through the system. And I will be writing one probably this weekend on the Amendment 4, which is the IP reform.
All right. Well, again, Tom, thanks so much for joining us for this monthly edition of the Martzist edition of the Missouri Liberty Report. Again, be sure to check out Tom's segment on KSGF, and if he's got the audio listed for the show he's going to be on this Friday, check that out. I have geriatric moments, but Tom will sometimes post the link to the KSGF part of the show that he's on, and I will listen in then when I remember. I should remember to do it every Friday, but geriatric John doesn't always remember to do that. All right. So again, to all of those of you in podcast land or at molibertyradio.us that to continue to listen and support the show, we greatly appreciate you. And to those of you on YouTube, Rumble, and Facebook, thank you for your continued viewership and support of the show. And so that'll be the last episode of this week. We did 2 in a row this week. This will be the last one. But make sure you come back next week, our normally scheduled day of Tuesday evening, 6:30 Central Time. Make sure you're back here to join us in the live stream at 6:30 p.m. And we'll see you next Tuesday for another edition of the Missouri Liberty Report.